Welcome to Jesus-Centric Leadership. I'm Donna Patton here with Pastor Josh, and a first time at the mic for Thomas McLean, and we're glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're on staff here now.
My first podcast.
Yay.
You'll be available for autographs later.
Yeah, hit me up after Sunday.
So how does it feel to be on staff? This is not what this is about, but I do want to kind of bring you in the loop, let people get a chance to get to know you too. But how is it to be on staff?
It's different, I guess. Growing up here, you get the kind of feel for the church. And I went to kindergarten and preschool here, and then did middle school, did high school here, and then kind of haven't been here since end of high school really. But it's like you see the changes a piece, you see the same things a piece, like the good and bad, and it's good to be here. It's good to be home. So, yeah. And home really is like, even I've lived in Nashville the last 3 years, and I'd always refer like my home church in Colorado. And so like, even if I probably, wherever I move, like Peace will probably always be like my home church in Colorado.
Yeah, when you say that you were, you went to preschool and kindergarten here, that's in our school. Middle school was in youth group, high school youth group, and then you actually did a semester kind of interning a little bit.
Yeah. So like 2018, so really I went to college in 2017, went for film, and then kind of halfway through kind of felt like that wasn't the right move, and so prayed about it, talked with Don about it, and student ministry kind of rose to the surface, and so left pretty much immediately from my one semester at Western State, came here for 8 months in August, and Donna kind of I shadowed Donna, and she let me lead some of the guys' stuff for high school. So, yeah, I guess it was kind of my internship. I just kind of learned a lot. That was already 6 years ago, and I guess before Josh, too.
Yeah, because
right.
I came end of 18. So.
Yeah.
So one last question to kind of help people know you a little bit better. But what do you see as the biggest challenge in leading student ministry today? And following me is not one of the answers, okay? Or that students face today.
They face today.
Yeah.
I think that's an easier question. I think there's just so much pressure on them in like so many different realms, and I don't know if parents have been trained on how to train their students on, like, because this is all new. Like, we were talking yesterday about the anxious generation and like everything being flooded at them, and so I don't know, it's hard to navigate, especially like the digital world and all that. So I don't know, just a lot to overwhelm students, and like, I guess figuring out how to take some, like George said, we listened to George earlier, but everyone has a bag of rocks, and like, how do we take some of those rocks away rather than give more?
Yeah, Thomas is referring to, I don't know when you'll get to hear that podcast, but we have George Dyer who's going to talk about 5 values of leadership. And yeah, we all have our stuff, but it seems like all roads are kind of heading back to social media.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that on another podcast, but thanks for joining us today. Today, we want to talk about why every episode matters. And we are talking about our podcast. Something that we hear is, well, that podcast was really fluffy. That wasn't very hard-hitting, and that one really made me think. I look at maybe the one with Jonathan, that's very like, wow, hold on, because we're going for an hour.
Yep.
Yeah, and then maybe some of the ones that you and I have talked about, maybe even this one, people would be like, really? You're going to talk about this for 20 minutes? But why do you see this as a valuable way of communicating to our leaders? And yeah, let's start there.
Well, first off, I mean, every podcast matters because we need our numbers up. So we need you to just.
I was looking at you like, what?
That's a joke. No, well, I think I'd start off with this. Different people, different things are going to hit different people. So I think like if recognized behavior gets repeated might be one. That like if you're a very encouraging person, you're like, well, that was child's play. I do that all the time. But if you're not an encouraging person, that might hit hard. And so I think there is going to be a difference. My guess is as we talk to different people, different podcasts are going to hit differently. And so just to understand that when we're doing these, I think you can gain something from each one, but it might not be designed with exactly what you need, but it is going to be helpful for somebody else. But then the other part of it is, and again, I think it's kind of what I said before, is that we always can grow and learn in something. And so I would say, like, even, again, using recognized behavior gets repeated, maybe you're listening to that and you didn't get much out of that because you're way better at encouraging than I ever will be. But how can you use that to begin to think and ask yourself the question, how do I apply it to my leadership? Because sometimes we want podcasts, or we want things to be kind of to push really hard on us because we want to go somewhere. And I love that thought process, but the problem with it is your learning eventually, if you're a leader, your learning isn't on somebody else's shoulders to push you. It's ultimately on you to how are you going to lead yourself. And so I think what we want to do with this podcast is start a place where there can be conversations with you and others, but then also with yourself on where are you going, and what are you going to do.
Yeah, I remember when the thought that came to me as you were explaining that, I remember when Joshua was little and we were talking to the pediatrician about sports. And at that time, some people were choosing only one sport. And the doctor said, the pediatrician said, I like to give their muscles a rest and I like to challenge other muscles. So I encourage one season and then get them in something else to build that muscle set. And I think the same thing is true as a leader. Like if I'm always hard hitting, then I can get worn down by that. But yet there's some of the other pieces of my leadership that I need to refine and I need to take a look at. And I think having a broad sweep gives me a chance to actually do that. Thomas?
Yeah, I guess the thought that was coming to my mind was kind of like a baseball analogy of, like, we're talking about softballs and hardballs, and like maybe for one person the softball is like the hardest thing they could ever hit, but then another person slams it out of the park. But like whether it's easy or hard for you, I guess I'd say, like, if you can slam that softball out of the park, like, slam it out of the park. But if there's like a fastball coming your way that you're struggling with, like, maybe that's where you're at. But I guess take what we can get and do what we can with them.
Yeah, and feel that challenge or where God's speaking into us in that moment.
Yeah.
Do you think the same is true as we grow in our discipleship also? Do you think there's times where, like, we discount opportunities or people that are speaking into us because it feels like a softer hitting opportunity to listen and grow? Or
Yeah, so I think if we're going to understand that ultimately God has a plan for your development, He has a plan for your discipleship, a plan for your leadership, like then your task within that is to have the humility to say that I can learn from anybody, right? I use this example a lot, but if God could talk through a donkey, there's a donkey, Balaam's donkey, that talks to him in the Old Testament, then God can talk through somebody that you don't maybe have a whole lot of respect for. God can talk through a podcast that may not be as hard-hitting as you'd like it to be, or may not say the things that you want it to say. And so I think it's really, I would say as a follower of Jesus, it's on you to have the maturity, the drive, the ambition in you to ask, what can I learn from this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Any thoughts? No. Shaking your head no doesn't
Donna didn't have another question.
No,
she always has
I
another
didn't.
question.
I didn't. I thought it would come back to Thomas. So why podcast? I guess that's more on me. As we talked a little bit about, when you and I sat down and we were talking about some of the future for peace, you brought up we have a leadership deficit. Maybe not a deficit as we talked about, but leaders that aren't identifying themselves as leaders or taking that next step into leadership. So we talked about how to do that, and I think I'm a believer that people reading is hard right now. I mean, we're busy, and so to sit down and read a book, you were talking about a book that you were reading yesterday, and yeah, I would love to sit down and read for a couple hours, but that's hard. But when we do a podcast, that to me, I can knock that out when I'm walking or when I'm doing some things, cleaning my house or whatever. And it kind of speaks to me in the now.
Yeah, and I do want to deal with something you said before. I think like that idea that I think I said out loud that we have a leadership deficit, I think like ultimately though, like that's on us, like
right.
Donna, that's on you and I as, you know, the leaders of the church who have now, you know, been here the longest, I guess, as we brought new staff in. But like the reality is that that's kind of what we want to do. We want to develop you to lead better in your home, with your family, in your church, and at work. And so we see this as an opportunity to sometimes challenge you, to sometimes give you some kind of simple things to think about, but really a way to, you know, if you're listening to this, a way that we want to grow you, because leaders lead people, and Christian leaders lead people to Jesus. And that's what we want to do, and lead people to follow Jesus.
Yeah, we were talking with Jeff Harpham the other day, and he was kind of just voicing, like, where are we going? What are we doing? I think question for you, Pastor, would be like, maybe what's the why behind creating these leaders? Like, yeah, leadership is good. It's good to have leaders, but like, what's the why on strong leaders?
Yeah, because we need more people that are leading the mission forward. And so the mission of Jesus, right, the mission of our church, we have a mission statement, but Jesus' mission is to seek and save the lost. That means to make sure that our kids that are growing up in our homes aren't becoming the statistic, right?
Amen.
Like 50% of people don't know Jesus, 75% don't have a church home. The kids growing up in my house, I don't want them to be a part of that statistic. And so I, as a dad, as a husband, need to lead the best that I can. We need more people leading in this church, because we had, you know, on Sunday, there was 30 kids up for the children's message. Like, I don't want any one of them to be a statistic. The statistics about the LCMS is that out of the people that we baptize, only 2 out of every 10 will stay engaged in the life of the church. We've had 20 baptisms this year. What 4 would I pick to be a part of the church? No, I want all of them. And so if we're going to accomplish that, and that doesn't even begin to talk about the people outside of our congregation that don't believe Jesus. I'm just talking about how do we lead the people that are here to know Jesus better. Well, it's got to fall on more shoulders than the 3 of us. It's got to fall on more shoulders. And so that's why we want to build you up as leaders, because we have people in our church that won't know Jesus. We have people outside of our church who've never heard about Jesus. How do we lead people to follow Jesus more deeply? And we need your help.
Which is exactly what Jesus did.
Yeah.
He didn't try to do it all by himself. Yeah. He trained, he walked with, he lived with, and then he left.
Yeah.
And that's a hard reality. We can't just always leave that to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I like how you broke it into different areas too. I don't want somebody else leading my family. I don't want somebody else speaking into my child. And if I don't, somebody else is going to. And I think it's really valuable that we see the importance that we are a community and we go there together. Right? Yeah,
the only nuance I'd add, and then Thomas has something, is that I don't want somebody that's not following Jesus speaking into my kids, right? Don, I need you speaking into my kids. I need Thomas speaking into my kids. I need Erica and Becky, and I need all these people speaking into my kids as long as they're following Jesus.
Yeah, it was funny. They're not. I'm sorry.
Just keep cutting me off.
Yeah, I know.
We do this. Then we just got going. Thomas, you're there on the sideline.
We are definitely not scripted. So, but one of your kids, I had something kind of going on Sunday, and you were talking with a visitor, and I went over and talked to them, and I came back and said to you, I hope that was okay, and you went, we invited you into that. Sarah and I invited you to have a voice to them and with them. And I think that right there is the hope, right?
Yeah.
That we have those people that aren't afraid to speak not only to our kids, but I need it into me, into my life. I mean, and I've invited you guys to do that, and I've invited other people in the church to do that. I think need that.
I think it becomes like a thing of like, how do we empower each other? Like Josh empowered you to do that, and like how do we empower the rest of the church to do that? Because I think, like, I know I've been in sort of the trap of like, oh, it's on the pastoral and church leadership to lead everybody, and like that's a lot to carry. But like when I was in college, like there'd be like I studied Christian studies in college, and there'd be other students like, you think I should change majors to Christian studies? I always tell them, like, no, like we need more people elsewhere. Like the need is outside of the church as well as in the church, but like how do we empower people to I don't know, be the hands and feet of Jesus, but not feel like they need to be in pastoral or church leadership to do that.
Yeah, it's St. Paul, follow me as I follow Christ, right? And so we need more people that are doing that are, who are you following? Who are you leading? And ultimately, it has to come back to that we're ultimately following Christ. And so, yeah, this podcast is to help develop people and help to foster conversation in order that we have not staff doing a better job, but the lay people in the church doing a better job of leading.
That's well said, Thomas. That's one of the struggles that you had as to whether or not to accept this job of, do I get paid to be a Christian leader, right?
Yeah.
But not everybody's called to that, and that's a hump that you had to get over.
So I guess the context, like I worked at another church in Franklin, Tennessee as a part-time student minister, and like leadership was so there, and like I was just really struggling with this idea of like, okay, I'm a professional Christian now, like I'm getting paid to do the Christian thing. It's like, well, if I'm a Christian, shouldn't I be like living this out day to day? Like, not like I shouldn't be paid for my worldview, right? And so like I did have to wrestle through that, and that's not like a bash on church leadership, because the Bible talks about like leadership needing their, I don't know, you probably
their finances from the ministry.
Like Paul was a tent maker, but Paul also received tithe to continue doing the ministry like throughout the region he was in. And so I think it's pastoral church leadership isn't for everyone, doesn't need to be for everybody, but I think it's like I continually have to get to a spot of like, okay, like we need everyone. Like for me, at least right now in the season of life, it seems like the body of Christ is coming up a lot of like every member is valued. We talked about that in high school last week of like rejoicing with one another, like mourning with one another. Like if my hand is gone, like we should mourn that, but if my hand is thriving, like we should celebrate that. And so
and it seems like God just keeps repeating that, right? Like the community and the value, but community doesn't, just because we talk community doesn't mean we are community, and just because we strive to be a community doesn't mean we're a healthy community. I mean, we constantly have to be humbling ourselves and checking in that we're doing this for the right reasons, and we're living out the way that God's called us to. So we only have a few minutes left. Who was the leader? Who's the leader that is the reason that you're sitting here right now? Like, who's the leader that was walking in front of you that really helped you to understand that it wasn't about a one and done, oh, I'm called to be a leader and now I'm done, but really encouraged you to continue to grow, continue to be who God's called you to be, continue to humble yourself. Like, as you lead and you've got people behind you, who is it that you've really followed into ministry?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's changed over the years. I mean, the weird part is I think part of why I got into ministry is because I saw ministry that wasn't the way that I thought it should be. And so I know that's kind of and I think there's some of us that have that background in ministry. Like I initially wanted to be a youth pastor because I remember going to high school Sunday school or high school Bible study, and I was the only one there, and some weeks the teacher didn't even show up, right? And so and I was like, and again, and I saw my church kind of bring that back and then have thriving ministry, but like that was kind of a big deal for me. And so I can remember, Orville and how he poured into ministry, but then it's been different people through my life. Like I've my father-in-law, especially when I became a senior pastor, like my father-in-law has been a huge mentor and presence in my life, and even more national leaders that I kind of follow on podcasts and things have been impactful. But it's been different people at different stages in my ministry.
For me, it's probably honestly you, Donna, growing up and like having the influence you had on me. And I think it started probably like really started mid high school, and it was like the thing that impacted me the most was like I tell this story of like how you on Christmas Eve like came and hunted me down. Basically, it's like, hey, you should really come to youth group. And I'm like, maybe in like a month I'll come. And then a month went by, and I'm like, I should probably go to youth group. And so then I went to youth group.
I don't want her to approach me again.
But it was that, I guess, like the thing I value and learn from you is like that pursuit of people. Like Jesus had that pursuit of like all his disciples, all his people, all his children. And so definitely like you've taught me a lot, so you're probably top on the list.
Did you ask that question to get that comment?
No, I didn't. I'm sitting here going, oh, that's going to sound like I did. I think for me, my camp director when I worked 3 summers at Camp Lone Star, and Garland was the camp director, and every year he would just have this talk about love the children to Jesus. Love them to Jesus. And, we're in college. This is a fun summer job. Maybe I'll meet somebody, and get paid very minimal. But Garland really always brought it back to what it was supposed to be about, and loving the children to Jesus. And I think you've heard me say that at VBS. Love the children, keep them safe, teach them about Jesus, and that's huge. And I think it's definitely my killer. About if you're going to err on the side of grace. You guys have heard me say that a million times. And then I think you, Josh, we're just going to sit around the table and compliment each other.
That's basically why we do the podcast.
You have to be on staff a little longer for us to compliment you, Thomas, but no, I'm kidding. But I think, Pastor Josh, I think for me, it's your heart for the community and one more in Christ. And sometimes we get relentless of how we're going to do that. Like, that's not working. We got to do better. And you've set a high bar, but I have no doubt that that's what God's called you to, and it's not about us. And you really exemplified this is not about you. It's about one more in Christ, because we have a limited time.
Yeah.
And I think those 3 men together, it's been really good. And I never felt the weight of that leadership, like, oh, I've got to go do that. But I felt that God put them in my life at just the right time to be able to speak that in.
Yeah, I have one more. You guys have had him on the podcast, right? Like Ty Saucerman.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's not the kind of leader that's going to, like, stand up in front of people like the Billy Graham and evangelize everyone. But, like, he's, I guess, led by example, like, to the highest extent of whatever needs to be done, he'll do, and he won't complain about it. He'll do it with, like, a smile on his face, and he'll do it in joy. And, it's even an example of, like, the rest of the body of Christ. Like, he's not a church leader, like, vocationally or ministry-wise, but he led the youth group well. He leads his family well, but it's not in that rah fashion. It's like in the day-to-day, and like as things come, we're gonna handle it and do it.
Yeah. Did you know that Ty not only writes everybody? I don't know. I can't say everybody, but he's written students' birthday letters and acknowledged that, and also sent care packages to students over many years.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that until maybe it was you or your sister that brought it up of, this is who he's been, this is what he's done. But it's that quiet behind the scenes and so valuable.
Yeah, I just love how it, like, leadership can look different, but it can still be effective. That's why I want to point Ty out.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to really, again, the purpose of the podcast. Like, what we talk about may not resonate with you, may not challenge you, but it may challenge somebody else. But then to look at ourselves and ask, how do I make sure that this is pushing me forward to be more like Jesus? Because everything we're talking about, whether we quote tons of verses, whether we don't, it comes from, you and I, Donna, especially, like, having spent a long time studying Jesus and talking to other people about what it means to lead like Jesus. And so that's, going to come through in all of this. And we want to help you, right? We want to help you follow Christ, right? That's really our goal. And that is to be a leader. To follow Christ is to be a leader, to be a servant like he was.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for pointing out my age. She spent a long time studying Jesus. Thanks. I love that.
Is he wrong?
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. The Bible values old people, and you're not old yet, but you're working. No, we've got. Okay, I'm gonna go down my trail. We've got to get over this. Being old is not a problem.
Yes, amen.
It's a blessing to the church, as long as you're not using it, well, I'm old, I can't do anything. It's, no, I have wisdom and experience and something I can bring, because I've been reading the Bible. You've been reading the Bible how many more years than I have? That's a blessing.
2.
That's a good thing. Yeah, 2 years. But we've got to,
I don't know. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I think that's, okay, just we'll quit going down these rabbit trails. But I think that's why we're being so intentional right now, focusing on the founder or the early generation. Generations are a little bit older than I am, who we've said to them, we need your excitement for peace. We need the history that you carry. We need that because that makes us better, and we can't just go on without that. So yeah, you're right.
We need you to teach us. If you've been around a while, we need you to teach us. There's value in that.
I call them seasoned veterans.
I mean, you can say that. I'm just using the biblical word.
Stop. Now he's just like being snarky. So with that's why
we should probably wrap up.
Yeah, that's why every episode matters. And thanks for letting us kind of go down these rabbit trails. But we appreciate you, and we appreciate your willingness to invest time in Jesus-Centric leadership. Have a great day.